let's say leaders' behaviors, all of our behaviors, are in fact changing for the better. Why is that happening?
Virtue has been and always will be its own reward. And I think we live in a time where it's become more practical, if not fashionable, to be principled. You can't manage your reputation. You have to earn it one behavior at a time because it precedes you on Google before you show up anywhere. There are all these practical reasons to do the right thing. What worries me is that when people discover that it's practical to be principled, they start to be Machiavellian about being principled, meaning I'll say I'm sorry because people won't sue me. And then you get sued because the lack of authenticity shines through. But if I had to give you the number one practical reason as to why now, we grew up at a time where we had a boom and bust cycle every 10 to 20 years. And if I know that I'm going to have a bust and it's going to be 1 year of pain, then it's like I'm in a storm and I'm going to bring down the sails and I'll be resilient and I'll batten down the hatches and I will be in survival mode. Because then I'm going to enjoy 10 years of prosperity. And if I knew that I was going to have a crisis every 10 to 20 years, I don't really have the incentive to change fundamentally. You sue a few people declare bankruptcy, you live through a little regulation like Sarbanes-Oxley, and then we're back to growth and prosperity. Now CEOs have a 1-year budget. And by April, there's a Greek bond crisis. Then there's a tsunami. Then there's a Gulf oil spill. Then there's this, and then there's that. If you have a crisis every 10 weeks or every 10 days, you finally have an incentive to do the following. Before, we were resilient for a year and innovative for 10. Now we need to be resilient and innovative simultaneously. And the only thing ever invented that does double duty, that can socialize and control against crisis and unwanted consequences, and simultaneously propel us towards good and advantage, are values. They do double duty. Instead of having a compliance department through rules tell you what you can and can't do, and having somebody else tell you what you ought to go do, values tell you what you ought to do simultaneously. So you get a bulwark against crisis and a propellant towards growth. So I think the number one practical reason is that the world has been reshaped. Because we're living, if you knew that you were sailing and the storm would be persistent, you would always be in stormy waters, you'd learn to sail with the sails up.